The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Great to have you in on a Friday. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, as we are loaded up. Going to be a great hour one and hour two. Keelan Smith will be with us. Scrap metal. It was his nickname, is what Mike Babcock's passed along to me. A great Husker, great NFLer, champion with the Broncos, known for incredible years with the Chiefs.
Two-time champion with the Broncos.
A 12-year NFL vet. His son, Keelan Smith, has committed to Nebraska. That came down the pike around noon. Really talented athlete from Missouri, believe Liberty. So we'll get into that with Keelan Smith's commitment. We'll talk to a proud papa in Keelan Smith here in about 25 minutes or so, and get his reaction. Jacob Padilla will join us. All sorts of Husker basketball news this week. We'll get Jacob's take, and did a really awesome padding the stats kind of breakdown of a guy that's going to be vital to Nebraska's court excellence, you hope, if you're a Nebraska basketball fan this upcoming season. So we'll talk with Jacob. Bill Doleman going to join us, Pride of Fairbury, NBC Sports. Billy D with us in hour two. Brady Oltmans. And then VSiN Sports Network's Danny Burke. Thoughts on the playoffs, NHL. Maybe even get his take on the gaming industry and the red flag warnings. It's been a week about Alabama baseball since that went down the last 48 hours. Numbers to get in, 489-1240, 489-1240 to dial us up. Can also use the toll-free number, 800-825-5865. Email chris@hailvarsity.com. You're invited to watch the show and can stream us a couple of different ways. First and foremost, the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Watch that, subscribe to that. Can catch the show in video form there. Give the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter feed a follow at HVarsity Radio. Follow that. Catch Damon and Andrew weekday mornings 7 to 10. Catch us, Hail Varsity Radio, on the way home 4 to 6 weekdays. Reminder, weekend edition tomorrow is happening at 7:30. So we'll start with some recruiting before we get to some Casey Thompson news. And Elijah, Nebraska is not joking. They're not blowing smoke when they talk about how they want to be multiple on offense. They're not blowing smoke with how they want to go get tight ends. And another tight end, a second tight end added to the class today in Keelan Smith. Some thoughts here. First and foremost, I love the bloodlines. As a guy who grew up watching Keelan Smith wreak havoc for Nebraska, as a guy who grew up watching Keelan Smith get about 10.5 to 12.5 sacks a year in the NFL for 12 years, you saw that translate as the number 2 pick overall in the 88 draft. And you have his son Keelan, 6'3", 210, could be a factor on both sides of the football. Plays defense, has played defense, built like Papa. And on offense, a really good junior season, over 800 receiving yards, 50 catches, 11 touchdowns. That's nothing to mess with. And he's a guy, Elijah, in this hybrid H-back, fullback offense. Nebraska absolutely wants a guy that's big, that's fast, that's physical, and is uber athletic. And I think he's a guy that is a multi-sport talent and good for Nebraska. Nebraska able, listen, Coach Drink has got some stuff brewing down at Missouri. And Missouri's been more successful than Nebraska in recent years. K-State absolutely has been more successful than Nebraska the last couple, 3-4 seasons with Coach Kleiman and what he's doing down there in the Little Apple. Really good, talented coach. Both are known as developers. And Nebraska able to win for a kid out of the Kansas City region against Kansas State and Missouri, despite the last 5 to 7 years. That's big. Nebraska wants to focus on talent close to home, in-state and around the state. That is what this win in the recruiting world, a 3-star talent, signifies for me. Nebraska and Coach Rule saying, yep, we are going to be all about getting the matchup or the mismatch with that hybrid talent, stress a defense, and then let's stay close to home and go get a kid, and let's go get a kid that's got the legacy of a Neil Smith. That's a great Friday for Nebraska football.
And I am still wondering what position Keelan's going to be playing once he makes it to Nebraska, because he's being recruited. All the sites have him as either a tight end or a wide receiver. He kind of played that hybrid. You flex him out. You don't put a hand in the dark. He's not an inline tight end, but he's kind of playing that tight end role. He does some blocking, but he's got good speed. They liked throwing him deep during his time at, I believe it was Liberty North, down in the Kansas City area. But then you look at who the primary recruiter was for Keelan Smith, and it's Rob Dvorak. Who you look at that, and I now go, do they see the bloodlines? Do they see the physicality? He likes him as a
linebacker.
Do you see him as an outside linebacker? He's got a great frame for it. 6'3", 200 pounds, put 25, 30 pounds of muscle on a kid. Now you're looking at a ferocious outside linebacker that can go get after the quarterback with his
It's an offensive athlete.
Oh, hey, and let's not forget with the bloodlines, I mean, long arms, tall, lengthy kid, built like a very skinny defensive lineman, which is kind of what outside linebackers have turned into. I wonder if Nebraska, I mean, recruiting him as an athlete, I wonder if they're going to see where he fits first and foremost, but I wonder if their current plan is to move him over that defensive side of the ball. Whenever you combine what this 3-3-5 needs to be with speed, athleticism all over the field, the fact that Rob Dvorak is the primary recruiter for this kid, I wonder if they're going to be looking at playing him on defense first before they put him on offense, especially when you consider the fact Nebraska's already got a tight end in the class, an inline blocker type, and Ian Flint, at least that's what he considers himself, an inline blocking tight end. You're still going after Carter Nelson. I mean, Nebraska's been in on a lot of tight ends, and we already saw the position flexibility earlier this spring as they moved A.J. Rollins to the defensive side of the ball. I wonder if they're looking at something similar for Keelan Smith. Go put him an outside backer and let him get after the quarterback.
Or you just say, okay, we've got an H-back, we've got an inline tight end. Go line up in the slot at 6'3". Let us beef you up to about 225, 230. I don't know what weight they want him at. And let him just go maul people. Let him be a guy that is uber physical in the slot or even as an outside receiver, and just play him as a big wide receiver.
I mean, you know what? His body comparison almost exactly fits Kyler Reed. If you remember Kyler Reed from the Bo Pelini offense, his great tight end, stretched the field really well. He was 6'3".
Incredible speed from Kansas City.
Yes, came in. It's almost a perfect fit whenever you look at that comparison. 6'3", came into college just over 200 pounds. I think, as you said, they beefed him up to about 230. And guess what? He didn't go hand to the dirt all that much as a tight end. They like to split him out, run him as almost a slot tight end, and use him on play action to stretch the field and run a post route deep. That's what they did with Kyler Reed. I can see the same thing with Keelan Smith, though I do wonder, with the bloodlines especially, Neil Smith being the father, do you see what he's got defensively before you try that out?
Well, I think you ask the kid, what do you want to do? See if it works. And then if you think there's potential for greatness and you move him over to defense, then you go there. But we'll talk to Neil all about it here in about 25 minutes. Neil Smith joins Hail Varsity Radio. And Neil's story is incredible. We'll talk with Bill Doleman about Neil Smith and kind of that mid to late 80s era. And Nebraska's ability to look at a talent, look at a prospect or even project, and then turn him into a great with the kid's own hard work and then Nebraska's guidance. That's the Neil Smith story. And just to reference it, Neil Smith was in a tough area of New Orleans. Jack Pierce, the late great Jack, dear friend of the show for many years. We love Jack. We miss Jack. Jack was all about Louisiana. He recruited the hell out of Louisiana, got great players to Lincoln from Louisiana. Well, Jack was down there in New Orleans, and they were looking at the quarterback, and they saw Neil on film. And Neal's film was like, well, who is this kid? He's just wrecking shop on defense. He's wrecking shop on offense. He's doing special teams. Well, I think Jack noticed Neal in 8th grade and then kept in touch. Neal gets to Nebraska, gets in the strength and conditioning program, and is ferocious. I mean, you had Danny Noonan, Neal Smith, Broderick Thomas, all crossover. And you had 3 consecutive years, more than that, but you had that sweet spot where Oklahoma was good and you were back and forth against OU, right? Colorado was still not there yet in the Big 8, but Nebraska's defense was just incredible. And you get a guy like Neal right after your run in the early 80s where you're playing for national championships, and you get Neal as part of that 84 recruiting class. And he's a guy that's probably a little too lean to play defensive line, and through his hard work and Nebraska's direction puts on the weight and is a absolute terror on the defensive line as a run stopper and a guy that gets after the quarterback. Him and Broderick were great because Broderick went a year later, 6th overall to Tampa. Neal went 2nd overall. I mean, until Sue was picked, Neal was the highest defensive player drafted for Nebraska. And I mean, I know you smile of the Denver years, but a lot of us remember Neal all those years with Kansas City.
I mean, what stands out being a guy that was a little bit before my time. I mean, I had the tapes going back of the 1997 Broncos Super Bowl run. And what always stood out about Neal was just how freakishly long his arms were as a defensive lineman. He didn't let offensive linemen get into him.
Get to him.
I just looked up the stats because I wanted to know from the combine. His arms measured in at 85 and a half inches. His wingspan, 85 and a half inches. For reference, he's about 1.5 inches, 2 inches taller than me, and my arms come out to 73 inches wingspan. So in an extra 1.5 inches of height, he has got an extra 13 inches of wingspan.
An extra foot.
And you hope that gets passed down to the tight end son. You know, maybe you can just go catch anything within a 10-foot radius of you. That'd be great.
Well, pretty cool for Nebraska. You look at the 2024 commitments right now. You got Gradney, you have Pyle, you've got Ashton Murphy, defensive lineman out of Elkhorn, Willis McGahee, the 4th, the edge rusher out of Miami, Christopher Columbus High, Ian Flint. We talked to. It's been a blur. Did we talk to Ian Monday? We talked to Ian Monday.
Ian on, it was Monday.
It was Monday. And then Keelan Smith committing today. So good for Nebraska. Let's talk Casey Thompson. As where's Casey go? You got Clayton Thorson. That's the wrong Thorson.
Peyton Thorne.
Peyton Thorne. Tomato. That was so bad. Forgive me. Peyton Thorne, good quarterback for Michigan State, got into the portal. He is now at Auburn. Clayton Thorson's a big dude for Northwestern. I'm sorry. Peyton Thorne is now on his way to Auburn. We thought that was going to be Casey's landing spot. Well, the coach that recruited him out of high school was Coach Herman when he took over at Texas. Coach Herman now at Florida Atlantic. It sounds like that might be the spot for Casey Thompson. I know there's been a number of suitors. You want to go in and win the job or be given the job, and I don't know if that's the case or not. I wouldn't think Casey would have an ultimatum, and I'm not speaking for him. I'm not speaking against him either. I'm just saying I would slam dunk it that Casey Thompson could go in and be the guy at Florida Atlantic. Do you do that opposed to some of the other options? How where's the door at with Nebraska? Is it shut? Is it cracked? Is it locked? I don't know. These are all valid questions to throw out there. If you're Casey Thompson, could you go win the job at Florida Atlantic? Absolutely, especially with your the college coach that recruited you down to Texas. Coach Herman didn't last long, and then you had transition, and away you are. I don't know. I think he could rip it up at Florida Atlantic. I think he'd do well. The NFL will notice, the NFL will see, and then they'll make their judgment. Or do you go to a Power 5? What's the situation? It's not that long ago that Florida Atlantic reeled off a 12-1 under Lane Kiffin and were ranked. And they were in a bowl game. They weren't in a great bowl game, but they were in a bowl game. So interesting to see Auburn go with Thorne, presumably over Casey. And I look at Thorne; he's more able to run, just because I think Auburn will incorporate some quarterback run under you.
And this is something we've said before, and people have given us hell over it. It's not that Casey Thompson can't run the football. I think Casey Thompson can run the football. It's what does Casey want to do, especially in your last year of eligibility. And if you're Auburn, you're looking at a quarterback that has shown willingness to run in his football career in Peyton Thorne, compared that to Casey Thompson, who has run for his life, which I would call reluctantly running whenever you're running for your life. Different type of running. You're going to pick the guy who's a willing runner, assuming you want to incorporate some quarterback run into your offense. What I remember about Tom Herman, both at Texas and before that at Houston, that was a guy that aired it out. That's why you go recruit a guy like Casey Thompson, a guy that can throw the ball, very accurate, can dink and dunk you just as well as he does the mid-range, and hey, if he gets you with a deep shot as well, more power to him. I think it makes sense the fit at Florida, or at FAU, I should say. He would come in and be the only guy with Power 5 starting experience.
I was just expecting as many Power 5 gig places that needed the quarterback to take their gig. I was expecting, and he still may, but I was expecting him to land at a brand name program versus Florida Atlantic. But I wish
go win
him
a
well.
starting job, get yourself some NFL tape for the draft next year.
We'll check in Jacob Padilla on the way. Neil Smith this hour.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Great to have you back. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency, 15 minutes away. Husker great and Chief great. We'll say Denver great.
Thank you.
Just for you, Elijah.
Hey, he won a Super Bowl with the Broncos, didn't win with the Chiefs.
He was nice. Neil Smith with us in 15 minutes. Jacob Padilla joins us to talk some hoops, as Jacob's been busy. Jacob, where's the weekend travel taking you this weekend?
Heading down to Kansas City this weekend for the KC Classic. I'll get a chance to see a couple of players that recently picked up an offer from Nebraska. So that's kind of good timing with that.
Who are the kids that are on display?
Amari Bynum from Omaha Bryan playing with Spokane. They're playing a showcase game. And then Braden Prager from Lincoln Southwest with ECG. Both those guys are going to be down here in the same place as my squad, so things worked out nicely.
See, I thought maybe you were going down to Phoenix to go watch the Nuggets sweep your Suns, but you're making the right choice, Jacob.
You want me to hang up?
No, is my answer. Jacob, there'll be no more Denver commentary on the NBA this segment. All right, Elijah?
Not this segment.
Maybe
later in the show.
I want to spend a minute on Prager. I've loved watching his game. We've seen a number of Southwest games. My little guy is in the same grade as Prager, and wowed by his athleticism and talent. Kind of had the sixth man role as a freshman for Coach Baugh. Had some really impressive games this year, and just what an athlete! And I mean, was a tremendous football player early in his time at Southwest, and he's kind of just focused on hoops. But Jacob, you've seen a lot of kids. I mean, the guy's got some range. He's really good at getting to the rim, but I love his rebound. The guy's just kind of an Energizer bunny around the glass.
Yeah, over Des Moines, played a couple of games over there, kind of a tune-up tournament I was at. He had 30 points and 20 rebounds in 2 games over there, or 50 points and 20 rebounds in 2 games over there, rather, against high-level teams, Spokane and Howard Foley. So, certainly. He also threw down a couple of posters, including one in transition on 2 different kids. I know tweeted that out, but Prager tweeted it, and I retweeted somebody else who had the video. Like, it's pretty impressive athlete. Like, he can. That's one way to draw a coach's attention, just going and dunking on whoever's in front of you, and he will do that at every opportunity. But he shot 42% from 3 this year at Southwest. It's not super high volume. I don't think he's a absolute knockdown shooter at this point, but he's got the potential to grow into a really good shooter. Likes the pull-up jumper as well. Really good with that left hand. And again, like the athleticism. He's got a good frame too, 6'6", kind of room to continue adding muscle and developing physically. So I guess I a little surprised to see both Creighton and Nebraska pull the trigger so quickly. But I haven't seen how he's done on the 3SSB just yet over the last couple of weeks. I know Greg McDermott was over there watching him and then played twice last weekend in person, and then had the offer shortly after Nebraska had a competition set up with him. So they're betting on the upside, the athleticism, and the shooting potential. I think Trigger's a kid that he's still learning kind of how to play the game. Like at this point, I think it's more just kind of going off talent and athleticism versus like being like super reading the game and manipulating defenses and all that kind of stuff. Like as he continues to kind of learn how to play a little bit more and increase his basketball IQ to go with his physical talent, he's got a chance to be really good.
Jacob, do you think that this offer is a part of the Sam Griesel effect, if you will, going after the hometown kid, maybe a little bit under-recruited, seeing what he turns into? Or is this a case of Fred Hoiberg and also Coach McDermott as well, trying to get ahead of a local kid before the who's who around the country start finding out about a guy and coming to Nebraska? Which side of the coin are you on with this recruitment?
Yeah, I think definitely, probably a little bit on the latter. And I know, like, talking with Nate Lenzer, he's really wanted kids to kind of rise to their level locally. Like as soon as he started taking over more of the kind of the recruiting responsibilities and kind of towards the second half a couple of years ago of the year, like he started popping up all over the place watching local kids, and he's doing his due diligence. So I think he's wanted to see some of these kids like, all right, who's going to have a chance to be at our level. And I know Bynum is a guy that he liked early on and kind of keep an eye on. He's the guy that he kind of put a star next to, like in this class. This is the kid that's got a chance to be the guy that we go after. And here we are. That was about last year. I know that, like, talking to him about it. It's like Bynum has had a really great stretch the last couple of weeks with Mocan during the live periods and has drawn some attention. So I think it's a bit of kind of that as well. Just like, all right, putting in the effort, like, all right, we want to recruit locally. We want to see kids that are at our level, because, like, ones are coming in, they kind of just missed out on the last wave because they were trying to come in late with the Chucky and the Hunter Salas and though they had Isaac Trout, like all those kind of high-level kids that we had come through here within a couple of years. They came in kind of right towards the tail end of that recruitment, and they were trying to play catch-up. So I think he's excited. He and that staff are excited to kind of be on a ground floor here and be able to see these guys come up from the 15U, 16U level, and hopefully build up that relationship to where they have a chance when these guys start kind of making decisions probably next year or year after.
Jacob Padilla is with us, HailVarsity.com and magazine. Subscribe today, HailVarsity.com/offer. Jacob's on his way to Kansas City for a weekend basketball. And Josiah Alec, really enjoyed watching him at North Star. Loved his hands, his footwork, his toughness in the paint. He's coming back to Nebraska, transferring in from New Mexico. What's this addition mean for Fred? And tell me about Josiah's transition to the Big Ten.
Yeah, it just gives you a reliable front court option that can go out and defend. Will give you hustle plays. We'll see kind of where his offensive game is in the Big Ten. I know he talking with Hurrdat Sports Mike Sauter after the commitment. He talked about getting his jumper right again. He shot about 35-36% last 2 years at UMKC. And I think that was part of the recruiting pitches. Hoiberg was like, all right, you come in here and we'll get that shot back to where you know it can be. Mm-hmm. That's always something that Hoiberg has confidence in his ability to kind of refine shooting mechanics and help guys get the most out of that. And he went from 36% 2 attempts a game at UMKC to taking like 1 a game and shooting like 15% or whatever it was this past year in New Mexico. So he gives you athleticism, gives you hustle, gives you defensive intensity, and gives you versatility too. Like he's undersized to play the 5 in the Big Ten, but there's a certain lineup where you'll be able to get away with him at that spot, I think, as well as playing the 4. So just gives you another reliable front court option. Go with Juwan Gary, to go with Reek Mass, the guy coming in from Bradley. Because, Blaise Keita is still a wild card at this point, just based on the health and the little we see of him. particularly on the offensive side. I think if he's healthy, he's a defensive asset, but we just haven't been able to see what he could do offensively. And, well, Breidenbach, who a couple days after Alex's commitment decided to enter the portal, it just didn't quite work out for him at Nebraska, and he wasn't a guy that you could rely on to produce consistently. So Alec gives you a guy, whether he's starting, whether he's coming off the bench, however he fits in there, he's a guy that you know is going to go out there and give you productive minutes. Not going to be an all Big Ten caliber player, most likely anything like that, but he's definitely going to help.
Jacob Padilla is with us here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. And Jacob, the addition of Josiah Alec left Nebraska with one available scholarship. That is until Wilhelm Breidenbach entered his name into the transfer portal. So I want to get your take on what that loss means for Nebraska basketball, and also what you think Nebraska is going to do now with two scholarships available.
Yeah, like I said, it just I know Hoiberg liked the fit based on what he saw from him out of Mater Dei and his ability to shoot and kind of handle the ball and move the pass a little bit, but there's the injuries, they're just kind of his own limitations. It just never clicked at Nebraska. I think really all you're losing here is a front court depth is the guy that you can play the 4 or the 5. Now you've got kind of Gary as an undersized 4, kind of a 3-4 wing type. You've got Alec as kind of the 4-5 type, and then you got Mask and Keita as your 5. So I think you'd like to have one more body in there. Obviously, we saw, especially considering what we saw from Keita this past year. If he's out for a sustained period at any point, you're looking at Alec as your backup 5, which wouldn't be ideal. So maybe they go try to find another big body that can provide depth in the front court. But at this point, I don't know where they are going these last two. Obviously, they got to contact Grant Nelson, but I don't expect that's going to be a tough one to win, even if he does come back to college rather than staying in the draft. Mm-hmm. But I think they're going to probably just continue to monitor the portal, reach out to guys, see if anybody shows interest. I don't know that at this point. I think they're probably set-ish in terms of, all right, if they've got a point guard, they've got their wing, they've got their big, a couple of bigs now. So you kind of added a little bit of depth in starters at every position now. So I don't know. It's there's a giant glaring hole. It's just a matter of, I think, all right, if you can get a really good player with one of these scholarships that can come in and push for a starting job, whether it be the point guard spot, I don't know that they're 100% done. I think U.S. is a reliable option, but if you can get an even better player at that spot, I think you jump at it. And U.S. as a backup point guard, I think looks quite a bit better than U.S. as a starter. But I think they felt like with some of their struggles landing guys before, they just needed to go get somebody at that spot, and U.S. is the one that they honed in on. So we'll see. I think it's always going to be tough filling up those last couple of scholarships, especially for a program like Nebraska, and when you've already added a handful of guys. Are you going to go recruit over the transfers that you just recruited this late in the period, or are you going to go? I think what Creighton did, they kind of used their last couple of scholarships to on some development. A couple of high school guys, and knock kids that come in here, be practice bodies, see what they develop into after a year or so in the program. So we'll see if I don't know if there's anybody out there less like that for Nebraska, but I don't know that they're going to go out and plan two big time contributors to these last two scholarships. But could maybe they go get one more, whether it's a big body or another guard, and then leave the other one open for any kind of mid-year movement. But we'll have to see kind of how that plays out and kind of who pops up on the radar. And we kind of head towards the closing of the portal here in another week or so.
Jacob, thanks for the update, bud. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you later.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency, legendary Husker, smiling today as his son Keelan Smith committing to Nebraska. Neil Smith with us. Neil, it's been a long time, man. Last time I had a chance to talk to you was with the late great coach Jack Pierce. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. I certainly miss Jack Pierce, and my prayers are still with him and his family.
Absolutely. We're thinking a lot of Jack, and we're thinking a lot of your day today with Keelan. Tell us a little bit about Keelan and this recruiting process as he commits to Nebraska today.
Well, he wanted to stay close to home. Keelan is, Lincoln is very close, and he did a lot of research into it. I didn't have any picking of this. This is something he wanted to do. He always wanted to follow his father's footsteps, and just like any average kid would do. And I'm really happy for Keelan. That's the day that he did choose a great institution to go to. I'm not mad at that at all. I'm happy for him. He's a great kid. He's a very community active kid, and I'm sure he would bring that same thing and the play to the University of Nebraska.
Tell us a little bit about the initial offer. Of course, Coach Mick offered Keelan, and then Matt Rule came back into the picture. Take us through that process.
Well, I haven't talked to Coach Rule. I know Keelan and his mother have, talking to him. But I know that, I told Keelan my only suggestions to him is that, it's nothing wrong with starting new, to be the foundation. You got to go into it like, that it could turn overnight and you could be the difference. And I think that had a lot to do with him and his ability to make his decision. And he did, and I'm happy for him. And, the main objective is that I want him to be his first sibling to come out, with a degree. So that's our first and foremost priority of this whole deal. And he's pretty super excited about it. He put in his feelings involved in it, and I guess he's want to wear the red and white. So more power to him.
Selfishly, to you, what did it mean whenever he picked up a Nebraska offer? Was that something special for you whenever you learned that?
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of myself a little bit. It put me way back in 1984 when I was actually the last pick of that class, and I came from ground zero. And how I got into it, not knowing where I was going to be at, not knowing, what's going to happen, the whole culture shock of, coming from a big city, to a small town like Lincoln, man, it just changed my life. And I know Keelan, that his family is close. That's a blessing to him because he still can see his parents. But nevertheless, I'm just happy to see myself, all over again, making it happen and being there. With Keelan on his journey.
Neil Smith.
I apologize to you guys because my phone has been ringing off the hook. I'm trying to do this here. A lot of beeping, so if you hear that, people just constantly ringing in on me.
No worries. Neil Smith, Husker great, Chiefs Hall of Famer, Super Bowl champ with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Tell us about Keelan's game, 6'3", 210. I mean, it sounds like he's going to be a nightmare for defenders.
Well, is built in the same dimension as me. He's kind of like he got the long arms. He's got the long stride, and his lower body was a little bit bigger than mine. But yet, I think that he can still develop, and he will. Once you get in there and get his nutrition stuff and get involved and active in the weight program. And I, Board Epley, when he first saw me, he didn't know what he had. He just said, you're gonna be my specimen. I put into it, I bought into it, and you know what? It turned out to be pretty good products. So. I'm looking forward to, Keelan, and he's going to tell him the whole time, what to expect and how to expect. There'll be a lot of questions in the beginning, but, he's super, super excited about, his commitment, and he put a lot into it. So God bless him, and I'm just hoping the best for him.
Quickly here, have you been in his ear trying to tell him, go play defensive line? Like, I know you said he's built like you, but he's been playing a lot of tight end, even a little wide receiver in high school. Have you thrown that out there? Hey, maybe see how the defensive line suits you?
Well, he did play a little defense. I wouldn't be that shocked that, if there was an accident, but I know that's not his first priority. But nevertheless, no one want to go from offense and scoring touchdown and playing defense these days, how things have changed. So I don't know. Like I said earlier, and if I could remember back, I was one of the ones that played outside backer, and when there was a number that was low in the defensive line, I got thrown to the defensive line, and with Coach McBride, that taught me how to play the run better and how to get good at the run. And then when I, had my opportunity to play the position that I wanted to play, which is outside backer, then I had I was already ahead. I was already ahead of the game where I can, I know how to rush, and I just used my run ability with my rush ability, and, they made a super pro out of me. So, it can happen. It very much happen.
Neil, last thought, and thanks for your time, and congratulations on Keelan coming to Nebraska. Neil Smith with us. How did Nebraska connect with you down in New Orleans? Getting a guy of your talent level to recognize Nebraska and then get you to Lincoln.
Well, me, it was an angel in heaven, sent by Jack Pierce. They watched reel to reel back in those days, and I never left the field. I played both offense, I played defense, and then I even ran down on special teams and played special teams. And I just had a high motor. I had a high motive, high energy, and I think that comes from my track background where I was literally, could run all day, got myself in the top shape, whether it was basketball or football, and was always in that shape throughout the whole year. So I think that it helps a lot, that I was how I got founded is that they was recruiting our quarterback, and they, when the quarterback situation didn't reside to what they wanted, they saw me, and they gave me an opportunity, and that opportunity changed my life. It changed my zip code, as you want to say, my area code, and everything else. So when I got that opportunity, I just wanted to show people that I can play too. And, man, I grew every day, under the leadership of Dr. Tom and, Coach McBride. The foundation was laid. We didn't win the championships when I was there. Well, boy, man, same thing what I did. I was a part of it. It almost reminded me of the same situation here in Kansas City. I came to a team that couldn't win, and I got them involved in winning, and look at them now. They become champions. So it's okay to lay the foundations to where you was and where you went, because it's still the same if you win the championships along the ride.
Neil Smith with us, great Husker, great NFLer. Neil, best to you. We'll talk again soon. Thanks for the time.
I appreciate it. I've always got on an interview with you, and you remind me so much of Kevin Harlan with that voice. So I love your voice. Keep up the great work. That's a great compliment.
You're feeding his ego too much, Neil.
I might be able to walk out of the room here, Neil. I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
Awesome, guys. You guys have a great one.
Neil Smith with us here, Hail Varsity Radio. He did me the favor, right? Not only spending about 8 minutes with us about Keelan's recruitment, remembering fondly his time in Lincoln, but the old Kevin Harlan.
Yeah, he's stroking your ego at this point.
No, we've talked to Neil for years.
You still have a big smile on your face.
No, I still do. I still do. That was very kind of him to say. But no, happy for Neil Smith, as good a dude as there is, and excited for Nebraska fans that the Keelan's part of the class. We'll wind down Hour 1 at Hail Varsity, presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Big thanks to Neil Smith. That full interview posted on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, the Hail Varsity Radio podcast. Also, the video portion will be up. Big thanks to Neil Smith, Jacob Padilla this hour. We're about 10 minutes away from Bill Doleman, NBC Sports, the pride of Fairbury. Billy D is going to get the old eye black out for the weekend. He'll be doing some baseball on TV this weekend, so we'll talk to Bill. Brady Oltmans will get his take on the Keelan Smith commitment. Also, the quarterback Nebraska is maybe interested in for 2024, Kamari McClellan, and get Brady's thoughts on McClellan's game. And then Danny Burke, VSiN Sports Network, NBA, NHL playoff weekend. Also his thoughts on just the gaming world and its response to Alabama and what's gone on with their former head coach, with the red flags that went up across many different sports books, not just in Ohio, but New Jersey and in Pennsylvania. Reminder to get buckled up. One of every 3 fatal crashes in Nebraska involves an alcohol-impaired driver. Why take chances? If you drink, don't drive. A message from the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office. So you are feeling good about your Nuggets.
Oh, I feel great.
To the point where we got our 425 interview almost hung up on us.
That would have been worth it.
No, it would not have been. It would not have been because you have Jacob touring the country on weekends as he's a basketball coach, and he's also checking out the AAU circuit. Good stuff on some in-state guys that got Nebraska offers. Of course, Amari and Frager, and then his take on Alex. So good stuff from Jacob to run down. Jacob's got a couple of different podcasts you can listen to and follow on the Hurrdat Family Podcast Network. Has a preps pod with Damon. That's always money to listen to, and Jacob always covers it well. His rundown of Bryce Williams, too.
Oh, phenomenal.
Really, really good.
And because I was mentioning the
film
fact
study
that I thought Bryce Williams was going to be a guy on that second rotation for Nebraska, and then after reading that from Jacob and then talking with Connor earlier this week, like I could actually see him slotting into that starting lineup in some way, shape, or form. So we'll see. Now, the thing is with Jacob is I've been really enjoying his content on Twitter as he watches Suns games. Mm-hmm. Now that he's not on the phone with us, I can say this. I've been enjoying watching him after what the Suns did to the Nuggets a couple years ago, because Jacob got a tweet about how great the Suns were playing a couple years ago, and now I get to watch as the Nuggets stymie that Suns apparently flawless offense with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. You would think it'd be performing a lot better against the Nuggets than it is, but it's not. So this is very much a cathartic release for me watching the Nuggets to the Suns.
You are going to be a sad man if they don't get out of the West.
Yeah, I am legitimately. This is like the year for the Nuggets because they're not going to get Bruce Brown back cheap.
And Babbers is going to swoop in with his Warriors and just make you weep. That is, if they get by the Lakers.
I think the Nuggets are the most talented team.
I think you're
West.
right.
I think the most talented team. Can they put it all together? They had a great game plan for the T-Wolves. They've had a great game plan for the Suns. The Warriors still scare me as they should. The Warriors should scare everybody with Steph and Clay. But I think the Nuggets should, based on their talent, be able to get out of the West.
All you got to do is just throw a bag of gummies to Draymond, and maybe he goes Space Cadet for games 4, 5, and 6 if you guys meet up. We'll get into hour 2. Bill Doleman on the way.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Thanks for hanging out. It's hour 2. It's a Friday. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. For all your equipment financing needs, go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Stream the show, the Hail Varsity YouTube channel, or the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter handle. Follow that at HVarsity Radio. At Schmidt_radio, Chris Schmidt. That's my Twitter. Elijah Herbel at Herbal Essence for Mr. Bronco fan and Nuggets fan. And way to scare off Jacob Padilla with your smack talk towards his sons. And I noticed the picture you put up of Neil Smith. It was him holding the Super Bowl trophy.
Yeah.
With Denver gear.
Well, I would have put one up of him holding the Super Bowl trophy with the Kansas City Chiefs if he had won one. If he had won one with KC, I would have happily put that up.
Leave it alone.
But unfortunately, the Chiefs just didn't win any Super Bowls with Neil Smith.
So. Him and Derek Thomas just gone after Elway for decades. He was good.
And they have 0 Super Bowls to show for it. Love you, Chiefs fans.
But as Neil said, you laid the foundation. All right? We welcome in the pride of Fairbury, NBC Sports, the professor. And he'll be getting his scorebook a workout this weekend with some baseball coverage. Bill Doleman joins us at Bill Doleman on Twitter. No video for Billy D today. Bill, what's going on? How's the week?
You know, it's pretty good. It's kind of dreary up here in Omaha as we're getting ready for Creighton and Xavier baseball to start their 3-game series. I was a little mystified, though, as to why is gas 40 cents cheaper in Omaha than it is in Lincoln. That's kind of ruined my week and got my weekend off to a bad start. Thankfully, I'm working so I can afford to buy gas in the capital city.
Yeah, it is a little cheaper in Omaha, and if you
A lot cheaper.
If you really want to roll the dice, just cross the river. I'd say bet on Bama baseball, but you can't. So,
hey, I thought it was great. Your last guest, I didn't quite catch the name, but I thought it was great that he said when you're on the phone, you sound like Kevin Hart. So that was a great compliment.
Yeah, Kevin Harlan, and it was Neil Smith.
Okay.
Kevin Hart.
I thought he said Kevin Hart.
No, Kevin Harlan. I don't know Kevin Harlan's habits, if he was a Marlboro Red guy, and how long he was a Marlboro Red guy, but don't smoke, kids.
You have been since you were 9, so.
The thought of somebody though listening to Schmidt's voice and going, "You know who that sounds like? Kevin Hart." That's just.
I've heard Tom Hanks and I've heard Kevin Harlan. I look like Benicio del Toro with 75 cups of coffee, or 7 bottles of whiskey. Something I don't know. But yeah, the voices. I've been blessed.
Yeah, Benicio del Toro's fair actually.
Yeah, that's very fair. So Bill, let's dive in. So if you're Auburn, you go with Peyton Thorne over Casey Thompson. That's what they decided to do. Does that surprise you?
Not really. Well, I think the thing with Thompson that's probably got more of the Power 2 conference schools and the middle 3 scared off is just the surgery. He has not taken a meaningful snap of football since the Iowa game, right? And you're going to roll the dice on 1 year, not knowing for sure if, how that labrum and other things. Let's face it, he was beat up last year, not just the final injury that resulted in the surgery. And, look, he doesn't run like his dad did when his dad was at Oklahoma. He does not have that versatility that I think that schools would like to see. And I think Thorne comes from Michigan State, high-level player, comes from a big program, right, in the Power 2. So I think your best bet, probably maybe your safest one, I guess when you're talking about a school from Alabama, bets, is that, it might be safer to go with the Michigan State guy as opposed to Casey. Because I just think the injury for him is the dark cloud that's going to follow him until the next season begins. And wherever he's playing, he proves that he's healthy. But I think that's a concern with everybody. It's like, somebody who gets hurt in Major League Baseball, a pitcher, having Tommy John or some other type of shoulder injury, you just don't want to risk bringing somebody in, and then you're on the hook. If that injury happens again or it unravels, you're on the hook for it. And, I can remember way back with the Salt Dogs when we would have guys who were, top 5 draft picks when they got out of high school or college, but they got stitched up, and it was like, they were trying to hang on, and that fastball that was 98 in college is now 85, and they're not getting a clean bill of health anywhere else. And even in the independent leagues, it's like, we can't afford to bring you in. So surgeries like that can linger, especially for a quarterback.
But, Bill, using the Salt Dogs as a reference, I kind of see this the same way, where sometimes, you could go battle in AA or AAA and see if you can get your shot in the majors, or you could go try to get a fresh start somewhere else, come down to independent baseball, play for the Salt Dogs for a little bit, and see if another team out there wants to scoop you up. Is that kind of what you're seeing from Casey's? You get some guaranteed playing time at a place like FAU, if that is the destination. You get some guaranteed playing time. You know what? If the NFL likes what they see on film for you, that they'll bring you in for a shot more likely than if you're sitting on the bench at a place like Auburn or Nebraska.
Look, if you're Auburn, and even though you're bringing in Hugh Freeze, right, it's a first-year coach, similar to Nebraska, but they're going to want to win now. And a place like FAU with Tom Herman, who Casey Thompson knows, he's probably going to get a lot greater benefit of the doubt and opportunity to go in and be the guy. And if it turns out to be a fruitful season for him there, that's probably the best possible place for him to go to get that kind of shot. At Auburn, if it's not going well, he's not going to get that. That first shot's not going to be a second and a third. I think at Florida Atlantic that he's got a little bit more of an opportunity, if that's the destination, with the system he knows, with the coach he knows, to go in, enjoy that final season of college football, stay healthy, and maybe you do get a shot. But I think that's probably the best move for him personally. But, You're not asking me.
Keelan Smith, Bill, committing to Nebraska, Kansas City area, tight end, the son of Neil Smith. We spoke with Neil a little bit ago, and I want to go back to Neil and also get your take on Keelan's versatility. I know you are cautious with the recruiting side of things, but what a squad Nebraska had in the mid and late 80s when you got a Neil Smith, a Broderick Thomas, a Danny Noonan.
If you think about some of those defenses back in the late 80s, they probably rank among some of the best that Nebraska's ever had. Mm-hmm. They just won't get the notoriety, just given the fact that there was that dip after 87, 88-ish, and then you dip down in the early 90s, and then the transformation is made with Ed Stewart, and you bring in your Mike Minter and your Tony Velens and guys like that. But if you look back at some of those mid to late 80 defenses, you had Neil Smith, Lawrence Pete, Danny Noonan, Chris Spockman, Broderick Thomas, Mike Kroll, Reggie Cooper, Leroy 8, 9, and 10. Mm-hmm. Just some phenomenal defensive players. And I think that 80, Neil's last year would have been 87, I believe. Yeah, I think that defense was, in fact, I think the 86 and 87 defenses might have been in the top 5 nationally. But you look back and Kent Wells was on those teams. Those were some bruising guys, may not have had the same kind of speed that they had once they made that transformation in the 90s, but there were a lot of guys that went on to play pro football. And those guys were really pretty good. I mean, can you imagine if they'd had, made that defensive transformation back when, Kenny Walker was another one with those guys. And you had some really fast defensive tackles, including some big guys like Spockman was big, Danny was big, obviously. But athletically, Neil Smith and Kenny Walker were tremendously fast defensive tackles. Those were great defenses, and the NFL experience bears that out. Brian Washington was on there, and he played for the Jets forever.
They were incredible, and you had a good offense. You had trouble getting by OU because everyone had trouble getting by OU then, and then you were right there against Prime. I know they played Coach Prime in the Fiesta Bowl and lost a heartbreaker there, but some teams that were on the doorstep again with some incredible draft picks that were not just really good in the NFL, but, I mean, Roger Craig and Neil Smith are two travesties that aren't in the Hall of Fame, and they belong there.
Totally agree with you on that. I was thinking about that when I saw the news about Keelan Smith, and I'm thinking, well, surely Neil Smith's got to be in the Hall of Fame. The guy had 100 sacks, played 110. On 2 Super Bowl championship teams, was an All-Pro numerous times, was really kind of a transformative defensive tackle in the NFL during the 90s. And you think, wait a minute, he's not in the Hall of Fame? And nor is Roger Craig, who was a transformative running back. And I'm throwing my buddy Todd Christensen in there, who was a transformative tight end, not a Husker. But nevertheless, it's like, who the hell are they letting into this Hall of Fame? I mean, guys like that are absolutely deserve to be in there, and I am stunned that Neil Smith is not. I'm sure his day will come, but we say that about Roger Craig every year, and for whatever reason, it just does not happen. But is it because they had great players around them? Well, maybe the great players around them were good because those guys were on their teams.
That's
right?
Very, very fair. And Todd Christensen, is he? The stats speak for themselves with the Raiders, but he had a glorious mullet, an even better mustache, and the command of the English language, Bill Doleman.
Amazing.
Big time.
He had a rant when we were together at the Mountain. Todd Christensen had a 3-minute rant on the NFL Combine that was 3 of the most glorious minutes ever uttered on television. One long soliloquy without support of B-roll. It was spectacular. It's probably still on YouTube. So when the NFL Combine rolls around and you want to get one man's opinion that counters everybody else's, maybe that's what kept him out of the Hall of Fame, is because it was so antithesis of what the NFL tries to preach with the Combine. But Todd Christensen, God love him, passed away about 10 years ago, I think it is now. Wonderful guy. But he, Neil, Roger, if they're not in the Hall of Fame, why is anybody, I don't understand what's keeping them out.
Bill, want to get your thoughts on Bama and betting and sports gambling in general. Are you blown away by the news with Alabama and their former head coach?
Yeah, to be honest with you, because there's just so much scrutiny now, and it is a complete carelessness, ego that you think you can get away with something like that. Everything is kind of traceable. Everything is noticeable in terms of if there's a big move one way or the other. What I'm kind of surprised about is, that Greg Byrne, Bill Byrne's son is the athletic director there, and, that this is happening under his watch. I don't think this is going to cost him his job, but I do think at some other institutions, maybe the AD would be asked to step aside, given that not only is it this, incredibly embarrassing and illicit activity with the baseball coach that seems to be fairly well documented and surveilled, but you had what happened with the Alabama men's basketball team. You had some incidents with the football team that Nick Saban pretty much iron-fisted and seems to have taken care of. And you don't hear a lot of those things with Alabama football. But two major problems with that department happening under Greg Byrne's watch, and it's just really, really surprising. I do think he's powerful enough at one of the most powerful institutions in all of collegiate athletics that he will survive it. But they got to get some control on that program. There's no question about it. That's really, really embarrassing.
Well, Bill, you forgot about one thing, too, that I don't think he's responsible for, but we'll see what happens. That new documentary on Showtime about Bama sorority rush. That's apparently going to be...
That's crazy.
Yeah, and we'll get into that, I'm sure, once that actually comes out officially. The trailer was crazy. But, Bill, sorry, continue, Schmitty.
No, I was just going to say, why don't you go down there and be our man on the scene?
Oh, I'd love to. Just go hang out with the sorority girls in Alabama?
Yeah,
sign me up.
Because if Doleman and I show up, we're going to get told to leave because we're the creepy old guys.
Oh, I got the creepy mustache, too. Don't fool yourself. I'll still get kicked out.
Elijah shows up in a van. Yep, mustache.
I'm here for the sorority girls.
Yep, and
I don't have time to do anything that. I'm just trying to keep football players and athletes eligible with their grading and trying to justify passing Connor Clark in my classes, and I'm having a hard time doing that.
Well, Bill, before we get you out here quickly as we get back into the betting scandal, do you think that pro athletes, college athletes, coaches, do you think this is more common than you think, them insider betting? When you hear Jamison Williams with the Lions, you also had Calvin Ridley with the Falcons, now with the Jaguars and Bohannon. Do you think this is more common than anyone in sports thinks?
That's a great question. That's probably best for the director's cut. Look, with it being so much more available, and it's going to be, more readily available in Lincoln in the coming weeks and months, right? Not to say that anything's going to happen, but I'm guessing that Trev Alberts has had a few meetings with his staff, and they've had meetings with their players, and you do not go to the south side of town, right? But, back in the day, it used to just be Las Vegas was the little oasis in Atlantic City, but now it's everywhere, and it's on everybody's phone. And I don't know how they're going to have to, but I don't know how they police it. And while everybody's attention is directed toward the transfer portal and toward NIL, this is probably something that is really going to require a whole lot of internal policing so that it does not become a greater issue, that, whatever you're hearing from Detroit and whatever you're hearing out of Alabama are more isolated, but I fear that that's not necessarily or probably not the case. And, who's to say that friends can't dabble for friends, right? Sure. Who might be involved in athletics. But I know that for years the NCAA has had some major symposiums and conferences with schools about things that go on, especially at schools that you really don't hear much about. And that's always been an issue, too, because they think it flies under the radar.
Bill, have great calls this weekend on NET with Creighton, okay, bud?
All right, thanks for the call.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Big thanks to Bill Doleman. Joined us as he's getting ready for Creighton Xavier this weekend on Nebraska Public Media. Good to have Bill with the headset on again. We say hi to Brady Oltmans, HailVarsity.com and magazine. Again, subscription, get it now. Get it for the yearbook. You'll love it. HailVarsity.com/offer is where you go and get that subscription in. Brady Oltmans in his football abode. Brady, what's good, man? How we doing?
Good. The damp weather is not getting us too far down. We've just been crushing it at the desk here before going off on assignment tonight. So we're going to be in good shape.
Tell me that with that shirt, what is that assignment tonight? You got a date or what?
No, the Nebraska Cornhusker Rodeo is this weekend.
That's right.
So we're going out there to do a story, both perfs. It should be fun. I get to cover rodeo again. That's good. And then there's a good story to tell with them being returning rodeo of the year, and they're trying to repeat this year. So it should be a good time.
And for those not watching, you're missing out. Check us out in the stream, Hail Varsity's Twitter page, Hail Varsity's YouTube page. Brady's shirt is absolutely glorious right now. It's stunning.
Well, and Lancaster Event Center, place to be this weekend. You've got that going on tonight, and then a couple of different rodeo sessions tomorrow, I think Saturday. So that's awesome. And I've had family that still barrel races and still ropes, and I was never tough enough to get involved with it. So
it takes a special breed, I tell you that much. And I'm
he's
not
being
one of
very kind. The tone of his voice says one thing, the smile, and it takes a special breed. It's all right, Schmidt.
Yeah, it's okay. Some of us aren't cut out for it.
I'm great at grilling bevo. I'm just not great at riding bevo. So there we have it. Football on our mind. Let's get your take on Keelan Smith, tight end. We talked to Proud Papa Neil a little bit ago, and check that interview out on the Hail Varsity Radio podcast page. But Keelan, man, 500-mile radius kid, but super talent, and I like the comp schools that were recruiting him, and that's K-State and Missouri. Both teams know how to use athletes in space.
Yeah, and he kind of talked a little bit about how, Iowa and UCLA were interested, but they kind of, they backed away from him. They weren't in constant communication quite like Nebraska and K-State and Missouri were. He's a really interesting case. Obviously, he comes from a great family, and he's got that strong bloodline. He's very athletic. He's got a good build, but the Nebraska coaches kind of sense that he's going to still grow a little bit. They see him maybe putting a couple more inches on him, which at that point would put him up to potentially 6'4", 6'5". So they could keep him at tight end and utilize him in a couple of different ways that way, or they could put a couple more pounds on him, maybe shift him over onto the other side. They're not quite sure position wise where he's going to be at, but they like his upside. Obviously, they like his family legacy. He's very athletic. I mean, I got his stats in my notes here, but double-digit touchdown receptions last year at Liberty North. So he's a solid kid, and don't be surprised if he kind of breaks out. Since he's still growing and still improving, don't be surprised if he breaks out for a strong senior year this fall.
Brady, back in hour one, I compared him to Kyler Reed, former Nebraska tight end that was here during the Bo Pelini years. They got the exact same frame, sitting at 6'3", 230. Kyler Reed did during his college playing days. They didn't necessarily play him as an inline tight end. They like to split him out, put him in the slot, and let him go exploit the seam that way. Is that a fair comparison in your eyes, Kyler Reed?
Yeah, I think so. I remember, enjoying Kyler and how they utilized him there. And that's actually probably a pretty fair comparison looking at him now. I went back on spring tape, and every morning you can see us, hailvarsity.com. We do the positional resets after spring ball. And I just kind of wrapped up the tight ends and looking at film. Marcus Satterfield did that a couple of times with Thomas Stoney. They like to move him off the tackle and move him a couple of yards over, even kind of as a split end style guy, but big physical body to where he can hold his blocks, get enough space for those speedy backs and punishing backs to get a couple of yards separation, but also fast enough and dynamic enough to get a couple of yards and beat them in on the seam. So they love those dynamic playmakers they can teach to block or have blocks to hold them for 5-10 yards is all they need with these speedy backs. And then they also had the additive athleticism to go out and catch a ball or two.
Now, Brady, whenever you look at his versatility as an athlete, we talked about it. You've mentioned it, the fact that the Husker coaching staff thinks he maybe could play either side of the ball once he gets here. Do you look into the fact that Rob Dvorak is listed as the primary recruiter for Keelan as maybe a tip-off that maybe outside linebacker could be the spot for him?
Potentially. I think there's some sense of those guys recruiting their positions, but also, at least in recent weeks, it really seems like they're kind of more regionalized because you've got Tony White. He's got that specialty of the West Coast. Donovan Raiola and even Marcus Satterfield kind of went down to Arizona and up into Utah. Obviously, they have a strong Texas connection. But Dvorak kind of was doing his roundabouts in the Midwest, Kansas, Missouri area this last week. So I think that's kind of a bigger tip-off for me. But he's certainly looking at it. He does have the body type to where if he develops like they kind of think he might, he could be a strong candidate for one of those jack linebacker positions or outside linebacker positions in college.
Brady Oltmans with us from HailVarsity.com and magazine. Brady Williams-Newari, 5-star defensive line, number 1 defensive lineman in the country, Lee Summit kid. I know Nebraska made the cut. What's the temperature right now? I look, and it's Bama, it's Tennessee, it's Ole Miss, there's Oregon, there's Georgia, there's Coach Prime, Nebraska. How is Nebraska in this race?
Well, I haven't talked to Will since he made that announcement, but his high school coach has said that, hey, the kids who grow up and are playing at Lee Summit North, they know how important Nebraska is to the area. I mean, Nebraska football, regardless of its results or win totals over the last decade, the reputation has not dropped off at all in greater Kansas City, and especially in Coach Mosey's room. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. He is the kind of athlete that if you can get him, he has the potential to change the entire outlook of your starting defense. I mean, he is a huge build. He's every single bit of 6'5", 6'6", 200 some pounds, and he looks like he could play tight end. There is not a single, he probably, I'm not a good judge of body fat percentile, but I would say it's low. I mean, he is cut, he looks chiseled. And he's a strong kid who's still relatively new to football. I mean, he didn't grow up playing it the entire time. He's only a couple of years into football. And considering he still has an entire senior year to play, there's a tremendous upside on him. I look at him and he's the kind of just physical anomaly. And I'm not into comparing him to other greats historically at Nebraska, especially on the defensive line. But I will say he has the potential to be just as scary and imposing as any single one of them.
So the upside is there, and the way I phrased that question, it wasn't, how's Nebraska in this? It's honestly, Nebraska's in the thick of it, and you laid out that there's still a ton of brand value in Lee Summit with the Nebraska football program, and Nebraska's really hammering local and then 500-mile radius with Coach Rule.
Yeah, exactly, and I think another thing that needs to be said with it is Coach Knighton. I mean, potentially, I don't know how long he's going to be at Nebraska because over the next 2-3 years, you might see him be a very hot commodity in coaching circles. He's very good with coaching the guys up. He knows what it takes to be in the NFL. Linemen really like working with him. They've talked very highly of him, and seeing his detail work, it's very impressive. I mean, he could be a really high caliber coach for them.
Quarterback 2024, there's still the topic of Dylan Raiola. I know that Satterfield and Coach Donnie were down not long ago, but Kamari McClellan has emerged. What do you know about this quarterback prospect?
Well, he's another one of the Satterfield guys that he likes. Satterfield recruited him to South Carolina while he was still there. I think he recruited 3 or 4 quarterbacks to South Carolina just in his 2 years that he was there. So he's a very active recruiter, at least at quarterback. But he's a dual threat guy who's got a really strong arm. For whatever reason, the offers didn't come as readily in the last 6 months as they had before that. But he's a kid who can look down. He can he's really good on reading his progressions and doing it in a good time. He's not going to sit in the pocket, stand there and scan the field for super long. He's very good with his eyes. He's very good at moving around and staying active. Looking at film, he's able to extend plays, but certainly not like with 4.4 speed, like say a Jeff Sims does. But again, he's a promising young man who I think the coaching staff is going to keep an eye on, and I think his recruitment to Nebraska might change slightly once a Raiola announcement or potential commitment could be made. I think that might be the next domino to fall because he doesn't officially have an offer yet, but he will be taking a visit next month here to Nebraska. And as you know, college football is wild and things can happen. I wouldn't be surprised if things kind of pick up steam here in the upcoming months for him.
Brady, are there any specific traits that Nebraska wants their quarterbacks to have, the guys that they're going out and finding on the high school trail? Are there specific traits that they're looking for that you need to check the box of if you're a high school quarterback to be on Nebraska's radar?
Well, it's really interesting because Matt Rule and Evan Cooper, the lead evaluator and secondary coach, quarterback and linebackers are the two positions that they really like to see in person. They really tend to not want to offer a kid until they see them work out in person at a game, at a camp workout or something. They like to see the intangibles working out at quarterback and linebacker. I think the athleticism, they like looking at track times as they do of every other spot, but arm strength is a big one. They like to see active body movement, somebody who's going to read the field back and forth, someone who's not going to be a sitting duck in the pocket. They like to see someone who goes through their reads and progressions and is able to extend plays if need be. I mean, they like the speedy athletic receivers, but those athletic receivers come even more valuable if they can move around and extend plays as the quarterback does. So those are the big ones that they're looking for. They're looking for a guy who's good up top in the head and is able to read defenses and move it around and have enough mobility to extend plays. And then, I mean, at the end of the day, you got to have the arm to get the ball there. And from what I've seen on film so far, McClain would certainly fit that profile. It's just going to be a matter of what else, how the dominoes fall to get to him.
About 30 seconds as the doors shut on Bell West's Keelan. I know Missouri really did a great job, and it wasn't a Matt Rule thing. It was you got to go after Raiola.
Yeah.
So can Nebraska come back to him?
I think so. I think considering Matt Rule and his staff, they like Danny a lot. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that they have it on good terms. They let Danny kind of know ahead of time they wanted to go all in on Raiola. Danny understood. I think if they wanted to go back on that and make a final push there and say, hey, stay home, we buy into our vision again, like we're here with you now, I think that's a potential. Now, at that point, it's up to Danny on what he wants to do next. But I'm never going to count Rule out on trying to flip commitments right up until signing day.
Brady, you're awesome. Great stuff. Read Brady with Hail Varsity. Follow him at Brady Oltmans. Buy him a beer at the rodeo tonight. Brady,
please.
Appreciate you, man. Take care.
We'll see you guys.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Good stuff from Brady Oltmans. And good recruiting segment there. Get the podcast, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Danny Burke shortly as we'll get caught up with the Pride of Chicago, VSiN Sports Network, at Danny Burke 5. So we'll hear from him in just 1 second. We'll look at some of the NBA weekend and NHL setup. Interesting to see where things shake out. Nebraska is a program that, and Brady laid it out, they're very transparent with the prospects they're talking to for 2024, 2025, and beyond. It's the vision that you got to connect with. And I think Nebraska does a good job of portraying that. And they're really getting some high ceiling guys. I mean, really, really guys that they see can fit what they want to do. And then away they go with finding their way into the program and then developing and then contributing. Let's talk some gambling. Danny Burke is with us, VSiN Sports Network at Danny Burke 5. Danny, how we doing?
Doing good, Schmitty. Looking forward to the weekend, getting some nice weather here in the Midwest finally. I'm sure you're experiencing the same, so can't complain, my friend. How about you?
We're doing all right. A little dreary today, but at least it's warm, and we'll take it. Before we get into NBA, before we get into NHL, Daddy, you've been a part of the gaming industry for a number of years now, and interested in your take just with the parameters that exist when a situation like Alabama baseball, a sports book in Cincinnati at the Great American Ballpark of all places, right, Pete Rose, and that happens. Your reaction to the last 3 days here with a sizable bet put on Alabama and the coach in contact with the guy putting the bet down?
Yeah, look, it's obviously unfortunate and kind of paints a dark picture about
sports betting, and when people have fears about it being legalized, it's kind of what they attribute it with. But realistically, these things would be happening regardless if it was legalized or not. It would actually be more sketchy if it was with a bookie, for example. Like, we've talked about this in the past, but when Arizona State had that scandal, the reason that people found out is because they had all these college kids driving to Las Vegas all making the same bet on the same thing. So really, because of the sense that it's legalized, the regulators act as the policemen, right? Like, they're the reason that they're able to keep an eye on that and catch it. So when you get a situation like that, when you get a situation like Ridley, yes, it kind of looks like a dark spot on the industry as a whole. But if you think about how big it is and just the minuscule amount of those examples that have happened, it's really not that big in the grand scheme of things. It's big, like, don't get me wrong, it's huge news, but if anything, again, it's just something that can be monitored because of it, and you were able to catch the coach who ended up having that happen with Alabama. So, yeah, it still takes you back that these guys would even risk that or do something so ridiculous, but the story's insane. But, again, as bad as people think it is, at the same time, it's good that you have these regulations to kind of prohibit that.
Denny, this next question might sound a little insidious, but I promise it's not. We were talking with Bill Doleman earlier this hour. Asked him if this is more common than people think. So I want to get your take on the regulations and the standards that are in place right now. Like, how would you go about placing a bet as a somebody who should not be a professional athlete or a college coach in order to get around these regulations? Is it possible to do so? What type of regulations are in place?
So you're saying, like, if I were in that position and we're trying to, like, game the system, how would I get around it?
How difficult would that be to go game the system?
So, I mean, look, realistically, in terms of placing a bet, I mean, it's not too hard to find a bookie. I mean, let's be honest. Whatever college campus you're on, if you know a friend of a friend, in that sense, it's not that difficult if you want to get set up with a bookie that way and do it, the underground fashion. And aside from that, I mean, just going through a friend is probably the easiest case scenario the other way if you are in a state where it's regulated. And as long as it's not like totally oblivious or you're totally obvious about it, you would think that's the other way that people would do it instead of going under your own names and just making it so clear as day. But yeah, I just, you just stay away from that. Maybe just bet on the side with your buddy, if anything, and try to avoid all that nonsense.
Danny, let's get into the NBA, and we'll get your thoughts on the Derby as well. What do you like tonight? Any in-game or props, or just overall? You got Phoenix -4.5. You got Philly dog by -2 to Boston.
Yeah, so with Elijah's Nuggets tonight, that's the game I'll be most interested in. And before the series began, I took the Nuggets +1.5 games on the series spread at -150. Now, I've told you guys this. I've got futures on both teams. Nuggets to win the championship, Suns to come out of the West. And the reason I went back and bet on the Nuggets again is pretty plain and simple in what you've seen play out the first two games. I mean, Phoenix has no bench depth whatsoever. They're putting so many exhausting minutes on Kevin Durant, on Devin Booker. You saw Chris Paul leave with an injury the last game. Whereas not only did Denver have the home court advantage, but this is the team that's been building with the same guys for years. We've never really seen a successful team bring on pieces mid-season and then actually execute it. I mean, you think about Miami Heat with all those three guys, that was before the year. The Celtics with the big three, that was before the year. A lot of times when that happens with superstars, it doesn't come to fruition, much like when the Nets acquired Kyrie, James Harden, and then Kevin Durant as well. So, long story short, I like the Nuggets heading into the series. And honestly, catching points, in Phoenix, you got to think they're not going to get swept, but I would rather take the points than lay it. If there is a game where Phoenix wins, I get it. It is probably this one as opposed to the next one. But for me, it's got to be all Nuggets or nothing. And at the moment, it is nothing. But I would still say keep an eye for these player props with Jokic. He's got a huge advantage over DeAndre Ayton. And especially when Ayton has to sit and then they can throw Jokic in at the start of, the second quarter or somewhere else, look to see if you can live bet some of his props when you know he's going to explode a little bit or if he starts out slow, because he's got a huge advantage, and you've seen that play out the first two games. And then for the Celtics and Sixers, really quick, again, haven't bet it. I did a series play with the Celtics to cover a game and a half at -130 before it was officially announced Embiid was going to be out game one. I'd still look to go back to Boston here. We always see the fallen star theory, and that was applied in game one, where a top guy goes out, your team rallies around him and play exceptionally well. And I think that's more what happened than the Sixers actually being better than Boston. And you saw Boston bounce back in game two. I think Boston still has the edge, as the odds movements are indicating here for game three. So I would lean with the Celtics in this spot.
Danny, before we get you out of here, are you looking at the ponies at all? 149th running of the Kentucky Derby. Is that anything you're interested in?
You know, I only have myself to blame, but I've been so consumed with all the postseason and Major League Baseball action, I have not looked a second at it. So if you guys have any suggestions, I am all ears. Otherwise, I'm waiting for the last second to place a bet because I've never won on the Kentucky Derby like most people anyway.
My suggestion, save your money. I don't know anything.
No, I don't either.
Is that the name of the horse, or is that an actual suggestion?
No, that's an actual suggestion.
Why not just run with Disarm? He's the long shot.
Okay.
30-1. 5 starts, 1 win, 2 places, 2 shows. He's been bred for distance.
If you hit that, we're going to Vegas with the winnings.
Here's what we're going to do. For the 150th, we're going to set up a remote on the infield next year.
Yes.
We're going.
Beautiful.
I have friends that are there right now, and they say it's great.
Danny, you're going too. This isn't just us telling you. You're being roped into this too.
Hey, you don't have to twist my arm, baby. Count me in.
All right. Juleps on Elijah, first round.
Hey.
Daddy, you take care, bud. Thanks again.
Yeah, you got it, guys. Thanks for having me. Enjoy your weekend.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
So good news for Nebraska baseball. They are up 2-0. A 2-run shot by Mr. Max Anderson. Left center, crushed it. Probably killed a turtle or two when it landed. See if Nebraska can get hot this weekend against the Big Ten leader. And, man, what a situation to be in where you're 2.5 out of first and 2.5 out of staying home. And Nebraska, Maryland, a full slate. Of course, we were preempted in Omaha, probably about 4:30 for pregame coverage. But, hey, Nebraska at least off on the right foot here. And it's a big series.
And that's the thing with baseball. It's kind of like basketball in that sense, especially at the college level. I mean, if they can make it into the Big Ten tournament, it's all about when you get hot. If you can get hot through the Big Ten tournament and into to June, it doesn't matter.
Give yourself a chance.
Give yourself a chance. It doesn't matter what your regular season look like if you get placed in a regional. If you can go win the Big Ten tournament, get yourself a spot in a regional. It doesn't matter how ugly the regular season was. It doesn't matter that you got swept by Iowa. All that matters is that point on. And I think we were talking with Evan Bland earlier this week, who said essentially going 500, 8-8, or 8-6, excuse me, what was going to be the ticket to get Nebraska at least a spot in the Big Ten tournament. Make sure you're well seated there. 8-6, Nebraska well on the way to doing that. You would hope, at least, with some of the talent in front of them. So it's all about getting hot at the right time. And if they can turn a series against Maryland into getting hot at the right time, I guess that's all that really matters.
Nebraska's up 2-1. Just an update from Husker Baseball Twitter. But still, Nebraska went down in the top of the second, bottom of 2. Here come the Terps. But see if Nebraska can hang on. Too much talent individually when you look at some of their pitchers. And, of course, Bryce and Max with what they've done with the sticks. You want this team to get a postseason shot. You feel like they belong in the postseason. They've just not done the work consistently enough to be safe right now. And it was gritty versus pretty, and too many times they've tried to be pretty this year, or they've looked pretty. I mean, they've had some incredible offensive outputs against the Northwesterns of the world. But the sobering weekend was Iowa. Can they move past that? Can they get 2 out of 3 this weekend in crab cake and football land, and then come back and gear up for Tuesday to finish off Creighton and then win against Creighton?
Well, I mean, the most classic thing that this team could do based on what they've done this year is to go and do really well against Maryland, whether that be win all 3 or win 2 or 3, win the series, and then you turn it around and next weekend you lose 2 or 3 to Penn State. That'd be very Nebraska baseball of them, and I hope I didn't just speak that into existence.
No, don't pull a Costanza, and Elijah is not speaking
but
that into
that's how
existence.
the season has gone, is they go up and they play great against great competition.
Play up to their competition and play way down to their others.
Exactly. That's how this season has gone. So God forbid that happens, but that would just be so fitting for how this season has gone for Husker baseball. It'd be typical. So Good for them getting off on the right foot, though, against Maryland. You hope they can turn that into a Friday night victory. And if you're 1-0 in a series against Maryland, the type of confidence that could breed for the rest of the weekend would be huge.
Get the podcast. Good show today. Good stuff from Neil Smith on his son Keelan Smith committing to Nebraska today for 2024. Brady Oltmans' killer recruiting segment. Good to hear from him. Bill Doleman, always informative and entertaining. Jacob Padilla all over basketball. So enjoy your Friday show. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. Get the whole show or the pod or segment you want to hear. Always stream us, Hail Varsity YouTube or Hail Varsity Radio Twitter. Talk to you tomorrow, weekend edition, 7:30. Take care.